In this episode of Bible Study Greek, I'm actually not going to criticize any of the translations, but I came across something that feels different, and I'm not actually quite sure what to do with this. It has to do with concordance. You know what that is? Concordance is when you try to translate the same Greek word with the same English word. You know, as long as the meaning fits the context, it is proper English. It's a very good thing to do in translation because you can watch the flow of a word through a passage. But in Matthew 20, I've got this passage where the translations do follow concordance, and I'm sitting here scratching my head and go, why? Matthew 20, verse 26, we just come out of the passage about James and John winning places of honor, and Jesus says, "It will not be this way among you all, but whoever wishes among you to be great will be your diakonos," will be your servant. You'll notice the translations all go with servant. "And whoever wishes among you to be first," so there's the parallelism, great and first, "will be your doulos." Well, you'll notice that all the translations except for mine do keep concordance, and they are translating diakonos as servant and doulos as slave. So, I mean, yeah, that's what you would expect them to do. But here's my question. What's the difference between a servant and a slave? I mean, diakonos and doulos have this overlapping meaning where they can both mean servant. But why did Jesus shift from diakonos to doulos? And here's my problem. You look at the English translation and you can see how, want to be prominent or you want to be first, you should be that person's servant, be that person's slave. And you go, oh, what's the difference? What's the difference between servant and slave in this context? Because they're talking about the same thing. In other words, it's almost like following concordance, translating diakonos as servant and doulos as slave, actually makes it confusing. Strange, huh? So, if this were John, I would say that it's just a stylistic variation, because John does it all the time. I'm not sure in the synoptics you can say that. The only thing I can think of is that Jesus wanted to drive the point home. And so he says, this is over in CSB, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be the servant." Now, I really mean that, because if you want to be first, you must be the slave. In other words, you're going from one word to a stronger word. I guess that could explain the shift in diakonos and doulos. But it is a really interesting question, I think, of here you have following concordance properly, but it gets a little confusing. But I don't know, what would you do? Would you keep concordance and may perhaps be a little confusing, or expect people to hear that Jesus is becoming more emphatic? Or would you just translate servant in both and assume the shift is stylistic? Interesting question.